There are some crimes so disturbing, they do not feel real. Not because they did not happen, but because the human mind struggles to accept that people can cross certain lines and still believe they are doing something holy. This is one of those stories. A story about a remote house in Spain, a family cut off from the world, a cult built on delusion, control, and absolute obedience, and a night so horrifying that even seasoned investigators would never forget what they found inside. Because this was not just murder. This was ritual. This was madness. And according to the killers, this was salvation. It began in an isolated valley in Spain, a place far from the noise of cities, far from police attention, far from ordinary life. In that lonely area, a local doctor lived and worked in relative peace. He was used to silence, used to distance, used to strange people now and then. But nothing could have prepared him for the day two visitors arrived at his door. A man named Alexander and his son, Frank. They had come for a 15-year-old girl named Sabina, who had been staying and working near the doctor's home. Alexander calmly claimed that Sabina was his daughter. Frank, he said, was her brother. At first, the conversation seemed strange, but not yet dangerous. Then the doctor noticed something unsettling. Neither man behaved like family members reunited with a missing child. There was no warmth, no relief, no emotion, just cold certainty. Alexander spoke with the confidence of a preacher. Frank stood in silence, watching everything with a blank, almost inhuman calm. And Sabina? She did not react like a frightened girl. She reacted like a believer standing before someone sacred. That was the first sign that something was deeply wrong. But the real horror came moments later. As Sabina prepared to leave, the doctor overheard Alexander speaking to her. His voice was low, steady, almost gentle. He told her that her and two sisters were dead. He said they had been killed and sent to heaven. The doctor froze. He waited for the scream, the shock, the collapse. But it never came. Instead, Sabina accepted it, not with grief, not with fear, but with the calm devotion of someone who had been taught that death was not tragedy, but divine mercy. That was the moment the doctor realized this was no ordinary family. This was something darker, something rotten to the core. He contacted the authorities, and when police went to the family's home, they entered one of the most horrifying crime scenes imaginable. The house stood in a remote area, hidden from the world. No neighbors, no witnesses, no help nearby. Just stone walls, cold air, and silence. The kind of silence that makes your skin tighten before you even understand why. When officers approached the home, everything felt wrong. The place did not look chaotic. It did not look abandoned. It looked still. Too still. As if the house itself knew what had happened inside and was keeping the secret. Then they went in, and what they found was beyond ordinary violence. Inside the house were the bodies of 3 women, Sabina's mother and her 2 sisters. They had been murdered in a ritualistic way. Parts of their bodies had been displayed on the walls. Not hidden, not discarded, displayed, as if someone wanted to transform murder into a ceremony. It was not just brutality. It was symbolism, control, desecration, a statement. For the officers inside that house, it was not just a crime scene. It was the aftermath of belief turned monstrous, and the deeper investigators looked, the worse it became. Alexander and Frank belonged to a small religious cult with German roots. A group that believed it alone was pure. A group convinced that the rest of the world was corrupt, contaminated, unworthy. That belief alone was disturbing, but it was only the beginning. Because within that cult, Alexander's son Frank had been elevated to something far more dangerous than a child. Alexander declared that Frank was not ordinary. He was not just his son. He was a new god, a chosen being, a divine authority meant to guide the family. And once that belief took hold, reality collapsed. Frank's words were no longer opinions. They were commands. His impulses became prophecy. His desires became law. As he grew older, the family's devotion to him became absolute. No one challenged him. No one stopped him. And the moral boundaries that protect ordinary human life began to disappear. Frank demanded obedience in every form, even the most disturbing forms. His incestuous demands toward his mother and sisters were treated not as abuse, but as sacred will. This was the true power of the cult. It did not just isolate people from society. It rewired their understanding of right and wrong. Inside that house, sin could be renamed holiness. Cruelty could be renamed purity. Murder could be renamed salvation. And when that happens, there is almost no limit to what human beings can do to one another. Then came the decision that would end in blood. According to the investigation, Frank declared that the family had reached what he called the hour of killing. Think about how chilling that is. Not an argument, not a sudden act of rage, not a crime of impulse, a chosen hour, a sacred moment, a time set aside for death. And when that moment came, the women in the house were murdered as part of a ritual. What happened next makes the story even more disturbing. As the killings were carried out, Alexander played the piano. That detail alone feels like something out of a nightmare. While human lives were being destroyed, while terror filled the house, while blood was being spilled in the name of twisted belief, a father sat nearby and played music, not to stop it, not to mourn it, but to accompany it, as if the murders were part of a performance, as if death needed a soundtrack. That image has haunted people ever since. A piano in the dark, a family trapped in delusion, a son treated as God, and 3 women led to slaughter while music filled the room. It is the kind of scene that does not leave the mind once it enters, because it reveals something worse than violence. It reveals devotion without conscience. And then there was Sabina. In many ways, she may be the most terrifying part of this story. Not because she was evil, but because she showed how completely a cult can erase a person's reality. When Sabina learned that her mother and sisters had been murdered, she did not respond like a normal teenager. She did not break down. She did not call them monsters. She did not try to run. She accepted what happened as divine intervention. That is what makes cult psychology so horrifying. It does not just control behavior. It invades grief. It corrupts love. It teaches victims to worship the hand that destroys them. By the time outsiders see the damage, the mind has already been captured. And once belief reaches that level, horror does not even feel like horror to the people inside it. It feels holy. That may be the darkest part of all. After the killings, Alexander and Frank were taken into custody. But justice did not unfold in a normal way. Both men were declared mentally unfit to stand trial. Instead of prison, they were sent to a psychiatric institution. For some people, that decision made sense. For others, it felt like a failure of justice. Because whatever names doctors used, madness, delusion, psychosis, 3 women were still dead. and a family had been destroyed by a system of belief so warped that murder was seen as mercy. For years, the case faded into memory. A horrifying chapter. A nightmare locked away behind hospital walls, or so people thought. Then came the final twist. In 1994, roughly 20 years later, Alexander and Frank escaped. They vanished. And according to the story, their whereabouts were never conclusively discovered. Think about that. Two men tied to one of the most grotesque ritual killings imaginable. Gone. No clear ending, no final capture, no guaranteed closure, just absence. And that kind of ending is often more frightening than certainty. Because prison is final. Death is final. But disappearance leaves the door open. It allows the mind to imagine the worst. Did they die somewhere unknown? Did they change names and disappear into ordinary life? Or did they carry their beliefs with them, waiting for another place, another follower, another house, hidden far from the world? That question is what gives this story its lasting power. Not just what happened, but the fact that it may never have truly ended. Most horror stories rely on darkness, on ghosts, on haunted places. But the most terrifying stories do not need any of that. Because sometimes the real nightmare is not the house. It is not the valley. It is not even the bodies on the wall. Sometimes the real nightmare is belief, a belief so absolute that it erases empathy, a belief so powerful that it turns abuse into worship, a belief so corrupted that a child can be called God, and murder can be called heaven. That is why this case still feels so disturbing. Because beneath the ritual, beneath the blood, beneath the madness, it reveals something deeply human. How far people can fall when no one questions power, when fear becomes obedience, when obedience becomes faith, and when faith becomes an excuse for evil. Somewhere in Spain, that house became a monument to that truth. A place where delusion took complete control. A place where 3 women died in the name of purity. A place where a piano played while innocence was butchered. And if there is one thing that makes this story impossible to forget, it is this. The killers did not believe they were committing murder. They believed they were doing something righteous. And when evil no longer sees itself as evil, that is when it becomes truly terrifying. And maybe that is the scariest part of all, not that monsters exist, but that sometimes they pray before they kill.